Three, two, one, here we go. Hello, everyone. I'm Brian the Rain Man Lucas. Welcome to RAINMAN'S Take, observations on the world we live in. We're going to take a deeper dive into topics of interest to me, including politics, current events, history, popular culture, and social issues. You'll find the diversity of topics refreshing. In our clickbait, soundbite society, we rarely get the whole story. RAINMAN'S Take interviews interesting people as well as peeling back the onion on specific topics, all with the goal of getting people to think more deeply about a subject. Hey everybody, it's the Rain Man. I want to introduce my guest, an old friend, Joe Snooze Crane. Joe, how you doing, brother?
Good, Rain Man. Long time no see, man. I think maybe the last time we actually saw each other might have been like when we got back from Iraq back in '04. Is that possible?
It is possible, which is scary how fast it goes by.
No kidding.
Yeah, it's amazing. Anyway, so I got kind of reacquainted with Joe through the website and the organization that he runs that we're going to talk a ton about today. I got reintroduced to him through Larry Cheese Colby. If you guys remember, I interviewed Cheese maybe 3 or 4 episodes ago about the books that he's writing. So Cheese told me to look up Veteran on the Move, and so I immediately reached out to Joe because it's been way too long. As Joe just mentioned, we flew together in Iraq in 2004 with HMLA 775, and then Joe is not only has he been running Veteran on the Move, but he's also an airline pilot for one of the major carriers, and I'm sure we'll talk about that as well. But Joe, I appreciate you coming on board, brother.
Great to be here, man. I will say this. I've done 362 interviews on the Veteran on the Move podcast over about 6 years. I'm much more comfortable doing the interview than I am being interviewed.
You know, it's funny because when Cheese told me about you, I was like, okay, how should we do this? Should he interview me? Should I interview him? I tell you what, we'll just make it a conversation, and then we can see if we can download it on both both sites.
I just got Cheese's book in the mail, by the way. He sent me one of his book, Buffalo Pilot. I haven't read it yet, but I just got it in the mail.
Yeah, I just when I was getting ready to interview him, I ordered his the 3 series. I think he's writing number 4 right now, right? I think
that
so.
Sounds right. Yeah.
Yeah,
He's got a few of them.
And then, dude, looking back further into Veteran on the Move, I noticed you interviewed Dan Shoeshine a while back.
Yeah, a long time ago, really. Probably when his book first came out.
Okay, so that was what, 2014 or 15, I think, somewhere around there.
Yeah, so I knew it was. I can't remember if I thought I went back and looked it up because, you know, his Dan Sheehan's book hit the Commandant's reading list, which is a big deal about a year or so ago. Yeah. And so I think I went back and looked when I interviewed him, but it was a long time ago. Like he had just released his book.
Okay.
I interviewed him, yeah.
And so when did you start Veteran on the Move then?
It was in the summer of 2014. So I passed the 6-year mark this last summer.
That's awesome, dude.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right, my man, let's do this real quick. Let's give everybody the Reader's Digest of your life up until the time you and I met, and then we'll go from there.
Great.
So talk to me. Fill us in a little bit on your background, where you're from, your Marine Corps experience.
Yeah, so most of my family's originally from Indiana, and then before I started 7th grade, I was the last one left in the house out of 4 kids, and I moved to Kansas City with my parents. So I'm kind of the only one that in my family that really considers Kansas City home. I went to junior high, high school, and eventually college here at University of Kansas, just down the road, and then left Kansas when I became a 2nd lieutenant in the Marine Corps in 1990 when I graduated KU, and for the most part didn't come back until the very end. Did a couple. Eventually, the Marine Corps went through flight school and the basic school and all that, and became a Cobra pilot, AH-1, the W version, which I think as of a month ago is actually retired now. So yeah. You and I both have flown an aircraft that's now retired. So I guess that's really old. Awesome. So they switched to the Yankee Huey and the Zulu model, yep. Cobra. I'm not really sure. I've brought this up a few times. I'm not really sure what happens when you get to the end of the alphabet in an aircraft model. So we've reached Y and Z with the Huey and Cobra. I don't know if they go back to AA. We don't really know. I don't even know if that's ever happened before. So not sure what happens, what the next month will be. But
what's crazy is one of my buddies that I flew with at 369 went off and did HMX and actually just pinned on his first star. And he's out right now doing some work at Pendleton. And so we were just kind of chit-chatting over a drink over the weekend.
Uh-huh.
And the Marine Corps is going through a major reshuffling right now, to the point where they're almost talking about getting rid of aviation. So it's going to be, these next probably 5 or 10 years in the Marine Corps are going to be very, very interesting.
Yeah, that goes completely against the close air support philosophy that the Marine Corps has held since like airplanes started flying. But I think there's also, they're getting rid of tanks and traditional artillery, and they're replacing it with MLRS, right?
Yep. Yeah. It sounds like when they're done, we're not going to recognize it from when we were there. You know,
sounds a little extreme to me, but yeah, I've been hearing a lot of crazy stuff. First, I've heard about possibly, getting rid of or necking down the aviation side. That's hard to believe.
Yeah, I know, especially since the the Ospreys out there, both the new Hueys are out there. I mean, it's just crazy how they
strike fighters fielded too. It's wow, that's crazy.
We'll see. It kind of bummed me out hearing about that, because I've obviously got fond memories of flying and being over there. So, All right. So you joined. So you get in the Marine Corps. You get Cobras. And did you do most of your time on the East Coast or the West Coast?
I was a West Coast guy. So I went out to the RAG, the Fleet Replacement Squadron, and I was at the RAG when that Cobra from 775, the blades came off in mid-flight and it crashed in downtown San Diego. I had the flight surgeon on board. Yeah. And so the Cobras were down for like 6 or 9 months or something ridiculous. So it took me like 9 months or a year to get through the RAG. And then I went to Scarface, HMLA 367, and did a couple Okinawa, mainland Japan, Korea deployments with those guys. And then I went back to the training squadron as a Cobra instructor after my 2 deployments with Scarface, and got out from there. That was back when the augmentation rates changed like right after that. Like if you're a helo guy with a reserve commission, it was like single digit % of guys that got augmented. Yeah. And then right after that, all of a sudden everybody started getting augmented. Everything totally changed after that. So anyways, I was happy to get out. I'd been on active duty for 8 years, on the West Coast for 5. And I wanted to pursue a career in the airline. So I got hired at ASA, Atlantic Southeast Airlines in Atlanta. I joined the Reserve Cobra Huey Squadron, HMLA 773 there in Atlanta. So I had my airline and my reserve job in the same town, which was great. And was doing that for 3 years and flew almost as much in the reserve squadron as I did when I was on active duty. So that was cool. Just never skipped a beat. I went right into flying Cobras in the reserve. So kept on doing that. Yeah. Through the mighty EMB 120, the Brasilia for ASA, a year and a half as an FO, year and a half as a captain. And then I got hired at Delta. And then I was only at Delta for 5 months in 2001. I got hired in June of 01. And then September 11th happened. And about 30 days later, I was on the street furloughed. So I was scrambling, looking for a job, grabbed some ADSW ADOS at McCurshik, which became MOBCOM here in Kansas City for a short time. Okay. And when they started mobilizing the reserve squadrons, I was looking to go with the Red Dogs because they'd been my squadron, but they didn't really need any extra guys because they were only sending like a half the squadron at a time. And then if you recall, Coyotes 775, they had that mishap down in Marfa, Texas, so they lost 4 pilots, one of them being the CO. Yep. I knew that was one of the few mishaps where I knew all 4 guys. I knew everybody involved really well. Yeah. Thielman,
Moonpie, Casper, and I don't remember the 4th guy.
Cross.
Yeah, Dave Cross.
Yeah, so that happened right as you guys were getting mobilized. And so somebody said, hey, you might want to call up the Coyotes. So I called up the Coyotes. I'm like, hey, I haven't flown in about 18 months, so I have to go through the RAG real quick, but I'll go with you guys if you need extra Cobra pilots. So long story short, I showed up in Iraq about maybe 10 days after the main element landed in Iraq. I kind of showed up in the middle of the night and dropped my stuff in a tent and we were, it was kind of funny because I knew I wasn't even like on the B team. I was more like C team because I had no quals. I had to go through that quick refresher. I was doing like 3 flights a day at 303, the training squadron, just to get done. And I showed up with no quals in Iraq, no tactical currency whatsoever, no night vision goggle currency. I was just like, I guess I'll just be sitting ODO. And that's pretty much how it was for the first week or so. And then we had a mid-air collision on the taxiway, and boom, 4 Cobra pilots were benched all at once.
Yep.
And I still remember somebody, Steiny, coming to wake me up in the middle of the night. He's like, "Hey, Snooze, man, we had a mishap. Everybody's okay. You know, all the guys are okay, but we need you on the schedule tomorrow. So it's almost time to get up." And so I went from like C team to A team almost overnight, and it took me, took a week or two to get back up to speed. Just but that's how things go. And so all of a sudden, I went from not flying at all to I was flying every day. So as you recall, a number of crazy stuff happened. That was when Fallujah 1 kicked off. The Marine Corps and First MEF had come back to Iraq. They went home for 6 months. We were part of that element that went back into Iraq in March of 2004. And when the Marines started going out into town, the 82nd Airborne is who we relieved. Once those guys left town, we're like, okay, I guess the grunts wanted to disperse throughout the towns. And that was like kicking a hornet's nest, and everything just went hot all of a sudden. It was crazy times. And that's when Fallujah 1 kicked off,
Yeah, that was when they strung up the security guys, the contractors on the bridge there.
Yeah.
We were in country for almost maybe a month, maybe a little bit more than a month. Those 2 Cobras collided heading towards the fuel pits. That happened the first couple weeks.
Yeah.
I'll never forget that, dude, because I was sitting in the ready room, which the ready room at Fallujah, for everybody out there, was an old Iraqi airfield that the Allies took over, the coalition took over, and it's massive. It's like 2 12,000-foot runways. It's out on a plateau, high desert, overlooking a lake, and the ready room was on one end of the runway, and then the fuel pits were on the very far end of the runway. And I just remember sitting out. We were probably sitting out on the porch, and all of a sudden you hear this loud thud. It didn't sound like an explosion, more like just a bit, like somebody dropped a huge piece of metal on the ground, which in fact is what happened. And, that was nuts, man.
Yeah. Fortunately, all 4 of those guys, I think Zit had a cut on his nose from his visor, but everybody was okay, but it was, both aircraft were a total loss.
Yeah. I'll never forget that too, because Zit played linebacker in a Division I college when he was in school. So he's a big dude, and he was stuffed in the front seat of that thing. Apparently it took a couple of guys to get him out, and thank God they were able to. But crazy times, my friend. Crazy times.
Yeah, so those 4 guys were benched, pending the mishap investigation, which turned out okay for everybody.
Yeah.
But for a month or 2, they were out, so we were running 24-hour ops and needed every pilot we possibly could, and all of a sudden we're missing 4 guys. So
exactly. Right when Fallujah kicks off, when the ops tempo just went through the roof. So now what? So I don't. Did you do both? Did you come over 05 as well? 04?
No. When we got back in September of 04, I went back to McCursick, and then from McCursick, I eventually went down to Atlanta and joined the Red Dogs again as an active reserve guy instead of just a reservist.
Okay.
And then I deployed with 773 in 07, 08. We went back to Iraq again for 7 months at the end of 07.
And were you guys flying out of the same airfield?
We were not at TQ. We were like most of us were at Al Assad, and I spent a lot of time out at Korean Village. Yeah. So it was a funny story. The only personality or the only famous person or any of those USO tours that I ever saw out of 14 months in Iraq was Tom Watson. The USO guys, Tom Watson, David Faraday, and Butch Harmon, I think, is that famous golf instructor.
Yeah.
Those three guys in this group of USO guys showed up out in Korean Village of all places.
That is
Middle of
crazy.
nowhere. Yeah. And it was really funny. They were a hoot, and they spent the night there too, because they came in the afternoon and they spent the night at one of the Army. We had a bunch of Army guys there in 07, 08. It was kind of, they were running it and we were just the air assets on board.
Right.
And, I had this conversation with Tom Watson because I'm from Kansas City. He's from Kansas City. We took a picture in front of the Cobra, and they were signing some rockets with a Sharpie, and just in about a month ago. So what's that, like 13, what is that, 13, it was in 07. So yeah, it was 13 years ago that I met Tom Watson there. He's over at a veterans event. He shows up for this veterans event. He's there, and I haven't talked to, I don't know Tom Watson. I haven't talked to him in 13 years. Yeah. And I went up to him and I said, "Hey sir, I don't know if you remember me, but you were on a USO tour back in like 07, 08. And he's like, "Yeah, it was Thanksgiving of 07. And I said, "Yeah, I was way out at this small fob in the middle of nowhere called," and as I said, Korean Village, he says, "Korean Village." And I'm like, "Oh, you remember?" We had this whole conversation. So it's cool. And that just happened like a month ago. So it was just amazing. But I mean, those guys were really cool. They were very down to earth, and they were giving golf lessons to a couple guys up on the roof at night. And they were hitting golf balls out at the tanks parked in the parking lot. It was hilarious. One of my fondest Korean Village memories.
I love it. And you're a kid, Korean Village. I've never been out there. All I remember people saying is that it's really small and it's out in the middle of nowhere, like out in the western desert. There's nothing around.
Yeah. The first time I went out there as the air boss for like a month or so back in 04 when we were, with 775.
Right.
We were rotating, different squadrons were taking air boss duty for Korean Village, which basically was just I had a walkie-talkie. That's about it. But, and so I was out there, and the only time out of 14 months in Iraq, the only time I went outside the wire, not in a helicopter, was when I was in Korean Village, and there was what am I thinking? The civil affairs guy, civil affairs captain named Rick Crocker. He was a civil affairs officer out there. He's like, "Hey, you want to go on this civil affairs thing we're going out to tomorrow?" So I geared up, and I got a bunch of cool pictures, and we went out in town and met the Sheik and Yoman, a bunch of locals and stuff. There wasn't a lot of population out there, but I was on the ground out in town for one of these civil affairs missions. And then the next year, when you guys, 775, were back in Iraq again, Rick Crocker was back there in Iraq again as a civil affairs officer again. And he got killed a year later from when we were out there in town. So I remember hearing about that. Cause I was back stateside when that happened, but, he was a Santa Monica police officer, they did a huge ceremony for him and everything. So, it was really tough to hear about that. So he's a good guy. And he was the one that, him and I got pictures doing that civil affairs mission. It was really cool.
Well, just out of curiosity, what were the civilians like? The Iraqi people that you met? I mean, they're just normal, just trying to get along with their lives.
Yeah, we had a medical team out there, and we brought as much bags of candy as we could, and they fed us lunch. And so we were like in this big desert, tent setup. It was kind of like an open tent. Yeah. With like Persian rugs laying all over the place on the sand. And they had this massive pile of this plate that was probably bigger around than my arm span, full of rice, lentils, and lamb, and all these fresh cut vegetables. It's probably like the best meal I had in Iraq. And they had this flatbread, the handmade flatbread. And we basically just reached in with your fingers and ripped off meat and threw it in the flatbread and threw some rice and green peppers and tomatoes in there and chowed down. There was a sheik and an Oman, the two religious leaders. And then they're very personable and very professional. There was a bunch of there's a bunch of the teenage boys were, I don't know, looked like they might be a little trouble. And then there's a lot of younger kids running around too. Never saw any women. They stayed in the house. They didn't come out. And some of the teenage guys were trying to, they wanted my camera. They kept trying to get my camera, So, but it was the only one I had, so I couldn't give up my camera. My 2.0 megapixel camera. I wasn't going to give that up. So, the lunch was the most interesting thing. And then Rick with his interpreter was chatting back and forth, just, making niceties. And it was a really long ride. It was like almost out at the edge of the Saudi Arabian border.
Really?
Yeah, really long ride out in the middle of, talk about middle of nowhere. That's where it was at. So that's really, was like the highlights. And I got a couple really good pictures with some of the locals. But the lunch and everything was the highlight of it. And then after the adults were done eating, then we'd clear out and all the kids came in, and just the kids had to wait until we were done. Then they came in and sat around the big plate and finished off everything. So I never really had a whole lot of interaction with the people one-on-one, not that much, other than handing some of the kids candy. And I had a picture of my two young ones with me in my wallet. My Velcro wallet had a whole bunch of Iraqi currency, a bunch of U.S. money, my military ID, which sometimes I took out, and a picture of my kids, and nothing else. So they thought it was cool that I showed them the picture of my kids. And that's a couple of pictures from that civil affairs mission. I put together like a PowerPoint brief when I got back from Iraq, and a few of those pictures are in my PowerPoint brief because there's some pretty cool pictures that came out of it. So, but one to Rick for letting me go out on that because he didn't have to let me go. So it was nice. It was just the only. In your 14 months in Iraq, did you ever leave the wire on the ground?
I literally went from my tent to the chow hall and to the squadron, and because you remember. Fallujah in 04 and 05, that was like nobody is going outside unless you are armed to the teeth. And,
yeah.
It was bad. And I remember they were, remember how they would cycle through the locals that would come up and work on the base?
Yep.
Then all of a sudden one day they stopped coming. And they were saying that what was happening was whoever it was that the insurgents were waiting at the end of the road going out of the base until you got to the little town there and basically interrogating the people. And if they found out that they worked up on base, they were killing them off or going after their families. And it was crazy. So so I didn't go anywhere near.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember that there at Al Taqadum, TQ was our air base right between Ramadi and Fallujah. And when we first got there was all these little shops and they had robust local food you could buy from these guys. And there were the guys pirating the DVDs, and there was a barber there, and this whole little robust village on the base. And they all had water running, and they had little yards and stuff in front of their stores. And almost overnight, boom, they all just disappeared and never came back.
Yeah. Sad.
And all the stores and everything just went to crap overnight.
Yeah.
And all the grass died, and that was it.
Yeah, it was strange time. Really the only time I ever remember, because you just, you know how it is. You just try to completely disassociate yourself from anything, thinking that anything's actually human on the other side of the wire. But I remember flying over one night. We were sprinting into Fallujah. It was probably April, May timeframe in 04. And our first go there, it was all low tactics. So we were, 150 feet and below as fast as you could go. And I just remember flying over this house, and you could see all the family were sleeping on the roof. Mm-hmm. And there was a cow tied up in the backyard. And we were there's a Cobra and a Huey going as fast as we can. And I can't imagine what that must have sounded like on the roof. And, next thing I know, I see the cow freak out, runs, gets his head yanked back from being on the chain. It's just, and for about a split second, I was like, damn, I'm sorry about that. I'm sorry, folks. I apologize, but not much to do. So.
Yeah, I know we were so low at times. There was a couple of times where some kids kind of out in the rural area, and we were coming up on this little 3 or 4 kids, and a couple of them leaned down and picked up a rock. They were getting ready to they're going to throw a rock at us. And then I like move the gun on the Cobra a little bit, and then they kind of stood up and dropped their hand. But we were like so low that I don't know how successful they would have been in hitting us with the rock, but we were so low that they thought they could probably throw a rock and hit us. I mean, and it's probably possible, but yeah.
And then having to bunny hop over the power lines at the poles.
Mm-hmm.
Crazy times, my brother. I
That
could talk all day with you about that, just kind of rehashing things.
Yeah.
So real quick, let's get to the veteran on the move here, and we're going to start talking about it. But for anybody who's interested in looking into it, it's veteranonthemove.com is the website. So you get back after that third go in 07, 08 timeframe. And then right after that, you just head straight back full time with the airlines, or what happened then?
Oh, see, in between my first deployment and my second deployment, I ended up coming back on active duty as an active reserve guy. So instead of being a drilling reservist, I was a full-time guy at the reserve unit. Okay. And that's when I moved down to Atlanta and deployed with those guys the second time. So I stayed in Atlanta with the one deployment. I stayed there about 5 years. And then kind of a freaky thing happened, man. My wife, like one day her leg started hurting, and like 4 days later she was gone. And it was what happened when we were in Atlanta. We were getting ready to brack from Atlanta, Dobbins down to Warner Robins, a little ways south of Atlanta. And I was going to stay with the squadron. But when my wife died, she had a strep A infection in a muscle in her leg. It was one of those really crazy, weird medical, no idea how it got there. There was no cut, no entry wound. Somehow she just got strep A in a leg muscle, and it just took off. And then one of those flesh-eating bacterias. And then, so within just a few days, all of a sudden she was gone. And so I became a single dad of a 9 and 10-year-old boy and girl. And I was like, I don't think I can strap that Cobra on anymore if I'm the only parent left. And the Marine Corps was really good. And I had about 3 years left to retire at 20 at that point. And I was like, I just need to go do something in the rear. Now I can't stay in a deployable unit. So Miggs was the monitor for us, the guy who assigned jobs. And he said, where do you want to go? And I'm like, I guess Kansas City, because that's where I got the most family. Yeah. Long story short, I found a job up at Fort Leavenworth at the Army's Command General Staff College. Got plugged in as the deputy director for the Marine element there at the school. I spent 3 years in the academic environment as an OPSO. We had like 35 students a year, so it was an administrative job, no duty, hardly any travel, didn't work weekends. It was an academic college environment, right. Really the best thing for us. So I was able to stay there, and at the end of that 3 years, I retired from there. So so I retired active duty eventually.
Wow.
Yeah. Crazy stuff. And then so when I retired from the Marine Corps, then I went back to the airlines, and we stayed living here in Kansas City where we still are.
Gotcha.
And I retired at the very end of 2013. So it's been almost 7 years, actually about 7 years.
Okay.
Not really. So I've been retired for 7 years, hard to believe. And we're still living here in Kansas City, and flying for the airlines. And so what happened was, as I got to my last year or two, I said, I've always wanted to go get the master's, right? And I'm like, I know I'm going back to the airlines, so I don't really need to pad my resume with the MBA, which is what everybody gets. I want to go get a master's in something I really like. And so I really thought I was going to do like an IT degree, because I got into programming when I was younger, like Pascal Basic and Fortran in early college. Right. But I never went, University of Kansas really didn't have a very much of a computer science program at the time. So I never went any farther with it, and I went into the Marine Corps, and that all became moot. But I'm like, that's a degree I could find interest in, But in the process of looking through and finding stuff, I saw entrepreneurship. I'm like, you can get a degree in entrepreneurship? I'm like, I didn't know you could get a degree in entrepreneurship. And because really, I've always kind of like been an inventor, or I love the concept of entrepreneurship and small business ownership. I played around with stuff most of the time I was in the Marine Corps. I was always interested in new business ideas and new products and cool stuff and gadgets. And so I was like, I think I'll get a degree in entrepreneurship. And so that's what I did. I got a master's in entrepreneurship at Oklahoma State. and competed in a business plan competition down there with one of my classes. I had like 90 teams. I came in third. I was like the old guy competing against all these young guys, and gals. And it was tough competition. So I was really proud that I pulled that off. And in the process of doing all that, I discovered a lot of really cool programs and resources. And there's a lot of college run veteran entrepreneurship boot camps and stuff like that. And I'm like, I had no idea all this cool stuff existed. And the light bulb kind of came on one day. Like, I'd been a huge podcast listener, a big podcast fan. Like, I love listening to podcasts. And for a long time, I thought, I even mentioned to a couple of my friends, like, man, we got to start a podcast. We could have one about aviation or something. I don't know. Start a podcast. We didn't know. I had no idea what I would start a podcast on. And then I discovered all this cool entrepreneurship stuff. And I'm like, if I didn't know all this stuff existed to help veterans get into entrepreneurship, I bet most veterans don't know about all this stuff. And that's where the idea came from. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to start a podcast. And then the concept of an interview-based podcast came up, because the thing I was really struggling with, I don't know if you've had the same conclusion, Rain Man, but I was like, I don't have enough content inside of Joe Crane to talk for a half an hour every I'm like, well, I'm not a big, I might find it hard to believe at the moment, but I'm not a real big talker. So unless it's something I'm passionate about. And I'm like, I don't think I could just have a solo podcast where I'm just talking to myself, And so the concept, I can interview other people. They're the expert. And I just, coordinate the interview. And I'm like, and I paired that up with the whole, I'm going to introduce veterans to entrepreneurship. And that's where the concept came from. Like, that's what I want to do. I want to interview veterans or anybody that runs a program or resource that can help veterans, and just go from there. And I know one of your questions was, well, where did you think you're going to get all these people, get all the people to come on your show for your podcast? And people ask me that, and I'm like, that's not going to be a problem. Matter of fact, that's why I'm doing the podcast, because I run into so many cool veterans and military spouses doing so many cool things out there in the entrepreneurial world and running their own business. I'm like, somebody's got to capture all this stuff, because this is really good stuff. And so I've really never had a problem finding people to come on the show. It's, you got to keep it going and be available and reach out to people. But finding new stories and guys and gals to come on and tell their entrepreneurial success stories, it's really never been a problem. The biggest problem has been my availability, working in my availability and my schedule.
Yeah. So obviously the first couple, you probably had to reach out to people. Hey, this is what I'm doing. You sound like you'd be a great interview. But at some point, I'm sure it started to get referrals like, hey, Joe, check out this person. You need to talk to this guy. And then I would assume probably now, like a guy like Cheese would love to be doing this stuff because he's out there marketing his books.
Right. Just like how you and I reconnected, Cheese connected. He's like, hey, Rain Man Lucas, right? And I'm like, yeah, I know him. He's got his own podcast. Like, really? So that's why we're here today, is because of Cheese, which I interviewed him probably a month or so ago. Yeah. And I quickly figured that out of the referral thing, probably from my feeble attempts at a few multi-level marketing companies over the years. I figured out, if I get somebody on my show, that's the last thing I say to them before we sign off is, hey, if you ever know anybody that would be good for my show, all I need is an email introduction. And then I just send them my scheduling link, and I'll keep them on the list. Like sometimes I'll get introduced to somebody, and it'll be a year before I get them on the show, which is fine.
Yeah. That's so you got a nice backlog then. So the pipeline's full.
Pipeline's always got a steady stream of, some people come and go, or the business somebody was in 6 months ago and I never got on the show and doesn't exist anymore. So once in a while that'll happen. But like sometimes I have somebody on the list for like a year, and we'll be chatting back and forth. Our schedules never match up. And then all of a sudden, boom, I get them on the show. Yeah. That's never really been an issue. Like I said, the issue is, with my day job, trying to fit in and schedule interviews around an airline schedule and family. And I'm remarried now. I have a boy and a girl. My wife has a boy and a girl. So we had 4, one left in the house. So chaos is getting a little calmer these days, but yeah, it's something else, man. I tell you, just finding that was never a concern of mine from the beginning. So I still remember people telling me, like, you know who John Lee Dumas is?
Oh, yeah. Yep.
EO Fire, Entrepreneur on Fire.
Yeah. Yep.
I figured out he'd been an Army captain, so I contacted him. I actually hired him as my podcast coach in the very beginning.
Nice.
So I'm John Lee Dumas podcast trained by the man. You know, he's still very popular, but he was really killing it early on there. Yep. And he's branched out into a lot of other things, but he's still podcasting. So yeah, I'm John Lee Dumas trained podcaster. I did everything exactly the way he did it and exactly how he told me to go about doing it. And I remember it was like, you're going to have to launch at some point, Joe. You got to launch. I was just petrified I might run out of, what if I launch and then I run out of people on my list?
Yeah.
It never happened. So I finally remember sending out the emails to like 7 or 8 people. Hey, and they were very long-winded, of course, way longer than they needed to be.
Yep.
And like out of like 7 people I sent them to, like 6 signed up, said, yeah, I can do the interview. And I was like, holy cow, it's going to happen. So launched, and I've released an episode on Monday since like July of 2013. I've never missed a Monday.
That's awesome.
So I'll batch them and get my queue built up, and then the queue will drop down a little bit, and then I'll do a bunch of interviews on one day and batch them and build it back up.
And I'm noticing, at least early on, you were doing all the interviews, but the name Brittany Colasano, is that how you pronounce it?
Colasano, yeah. So, this is, so I can talk a little bit about that. The thing about when you're a solopreneur, solo entrepreneur, you feel like you have to do everything yourself. And, in the beginning, you kind of do. You at least need to do it a couple of times to know a process or know how things work. But one of the things I learned from hanging around a lot of successful entrepreneurs and coaches and stuff is you quickly have to shed load that busy work. Best way I heard it is you got to quit doing nickel work. Say you need to do the dollar work, and you need to hire somebody to do the nickel work. So I did everything in the beginning. I did all my editing. I did the interviews. I did all the promotion, all the write-up. I did everything. And my first jump into having somebody assist me was I hired basically a virtual assistant to do the editing of the podcast, where they basically just put the pieces and parts together, the intro and stuff like that. And if I had sponsors, they put that together in the outro. And I remember the first guy was like from Portugal, and I paid him like $8 an episode. And he did a great job for about 4 months. And all of a sudden he just lost comm on me. He's like, yeah, I'm not going to be available anymore. And then I thought I was going to have to go back to doing it again. But ever since I got that first guy to do it, I've always been able to find someone else. And I had a great gal from the Philippines doing it. She did it for like 4 years and did a phenomenal job, and not very expensive. And then she got married, then she had a kid, then she had another kid. So then I had to, so I'm on about my 4th editor now, I think.
Gotcha.
And so where Brittany comes in is she's a military spouse, and I hired her through a company called VirtForce, like as in, virtual force, like Air Force, virtual force, or Space Force, VIRT force.com. I'm pretty sure it's virtforce.com. Anyways, VirtForce is owned by Kimber, who's, ironically enough, her husband is a naval aviator. They're living down in Florida right now, and met them through a podcasting conference back in March, right before they shut everything down. Anyways, she has a military spouse virtual assistant company. They like to refer to it as remote workers. I don't know, maybe VirtForce isn't politically correct anymore, or virtual assistant, maybe that's not politically correct anymore. I don't know, but she has a cadre, a very robust cadre of military spouses that have skill levels all over the place. And she helps you interview them and find them. It was a great process. As a matter of fact, the first military spouse I hired, I had her for about a month and got everything set up. And then boom, she went and got another job. But Kimber from VirtForce already knew it was coming, already had a replacement partially trained up before I ever even knew I lost the first gal. It was great. It was like, what, oh, we're still good. Okay. Yeah, sure. No problem. And that became, Brittany. Yeah. So Brittany's a military spouse I hired through VertForce. And I guess the thing I'd like to emphasize here for, as far as the entrepreneurial piece goes, is a lot of times you don't really want to, because you think you do, you're going to do everything better than anybody else. And that might be true, but an 80% solution and hiring somebody to do your busy work for you just frees your mind up and allows you to stay at the wave top level, and allows you to work on your business instead of working in your business. It's very easy to get bogged down and work in your business all the time, and you never have a chance to work on your business. Even though you're a solopreneur, you're still the CEO. You need to have that big vision where we're going next. And as soon as you get something figured out, or as soon as you get a way to make a little money at something, you need to take that task off your table and hire it out and get somebody else. So I highly recommend VertForce. I also hire people through Upwork, Fiverr. Hey, here's a plug. Fiverr is a sponsor of my podcast, right? So, shameless plug. If you use my code VETERAN on your first Fiverr job, you get 10% off. But I don't really do it because of that. But like, you can get sponsors at a pretty, you may not make a lot of money at it, but Fiverr's a sponsor of my podcast. I've had Navy Federal Credit Union all year as my podcast, and that's been my best one so far. And I love the fact that Navy Federal is a sponsor, because when I was at the basic school, I signed up for my Navy Federal bank account, and I've still had Navy Federal for 30 years. So I'm like, I love having a sponsor that I actually use, because and I use Fiverr, and I still have the same bank account number from 30 years ago with Navy Federal. So
I use Navy Fed for my business banking too. I mean, so
they got great business accounts, don't they?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, we got tons of business accounts with them.
So this is actually, I'm learning a ton from you, because obviously this is first class. Your whole Veteran on the Move platform, what you're doing it's impressive. One more kind of quick rookie podcaster to a veteran podcaster question. How long were you going before you actually realized that you could monetize this? And
it's funny.
Something that just kind of organically happens, or?
Well, I'll tell you the story. It's kind of funny. What I'll tell you is, be ready, because someday somebody's going to come to you and say, can I advertise on your podcast? And I remember the day it happened to me, and I had that like deer in the headlight look, like, oh man, this just got real. Somebody wants to pay me money to be on my podcast as a sponsor. And it was USAA.
Nice.
And through podcasting with all these veterans, I was interviewing a couple different people. There was this group at USAA called the Military Influencers Group, Digital Military Influencers. And USAA saw this up and coming groundswell of podcasters and mommy bloggers from the military community as a great way to get their message out to their potential customers and current customers. And so they brought us down to San Antonio. They had another trip the next year. We got to go to the Army-Navy game. I became one of the members of this military influencers group that USA was sponsoring. And through that, one day I got the email saying, hey, what would it cost for us to like sponsor your podcast for about 8 episodes? And I'm like, I didn't know what to do. I'm like, I started scrambling. Yeah. Went back to John Lee Dumas and said, hey man, what am I supposed to do now? I mean, it was like a couple years later. I'm like, now what am I supposed to do? But yeah, we had it all mapped out and it worked great. So
I have both of his books, and I didn't or sign on to be on his that training program, but I just kind of read the books and for lack of a better way to describe it, just me kind of fumbling through it. But the more you do it, the more comfortable you get. And obviously what I'm doing right now, it's primarily friends and family.
Yeah,
but I'm realizing that even with people that I've known for a long time are really interesting. once you peel back one layer of the onion, all of a sudden you're like,
I know.
I don't even know who you are, but I'm loving it.
So that's the thing about podcasts, and which makes a podcast episode so unique from anything else is it's a very intimate, trusting thing going on here. And so even though you may not have, tons and tons of downloads, the people that are listening have developed a relationship with you. They've gotten to know you because you're the host.
Yeah.
And what happens there is eventually when you get on down the road, when you get things formalized as far as monetization, whatever, you get to the point where you offer something to your audience. They're going to buy it very easily because they trust you. I mean, they know who you are. They listen to you all the time, and that's what's different is I forget the term, but like the number of exposures per sale, like you're going to have a very high conversion rate with podcast listeners, much more so than like any pop-up or pay-per-click stuff you would do on internet advertising, because there's a personal relationship already there before you ever even ask.
Yeah. And so are you still the one doing all the interviewing?
I do all my interviews. I mean, that's really the one thing I suppose that somebody else can't do. I mean, I guess if you think about it, somebody else could do it. It just wouldn't be me doing it, which is okay. And I've thought about having a co-host at times, but again, my schedule is so kind of unpredictable with my airline schedule that I have a hard enough time pairing up with just the interviewee. If to throw a third person in there would complicate it a little bit too much. But I mean, I've been doing it for like over 6 years now, and sometimes I think maybe having a co-host or even think about, okay, what's the next step? What's the next level? And I've thought about developing some type of a military media group or network kind of thing, to help not only just help guys like you and I, rise up and build audience participation, but build that as a business. There's a few out there already where they're building networks of military blogs and podcasts and stuff like that. And I think there's definitely something there with, somebody could build a network of all military oriented stuff, Yeah. Really the only place to go to right now is Google. You just Google the stuff and who knows what's going to pop up.
Right. So you say it again, how many interviews have you done over the last 7 years?
I'm 362 complete.
Damn. All right. So I'm going to put you on the spot here. Do you have a favorite? Do you have kind of your top 5 that were memorable, or people that have really gone on to have real big success? Like,
okay, you know who Dale Dye is?
Oh yeah. I
got to interview Dale Dye. And that was cool. Another guy through another guy. And at the end of the podcast interview, I was like, hey man, can we do some movie quotes? So, Dale Dye was in Platoon. He was like the company commander in Platoon. And he was the one that, when he's calling in close air support, and he's like, drop on my paws, it's a shitty fucking war, or something like that. And I'm like, can you do that one? And he's like, yeah. And he does the quote on the podcast. And then the other one he was in Band of Brothers. Remember that? Yep. He was Colonel Sick, the regimental commander. Yep. And the NCOs kind of lodged a mutiny against Ross from Friends. I forget what his name was.
Have you all shot from?
I'll have you all shot. He told funny stories because he's retired Master Sergeant from the Marine Corps. I mean, he's a real deal. Yeah. And he told this whole story about when he retired from the Marine Corps, he got tired of inaccurate movies about the military. So he went to Hollywood and said, I'll be an advisor and I'll make your movie militarily accurate. He didn't get much attention at first. He told this whole story about who's the guy, okay, who's the director for Platoon? Do you remember?
Yeah, Oliver Stone.
Oliver Stone, yes. It's kind of about his own experience. I think that's correct.
Yeah, he was Army infantry, I think.
Yeah. So, Charlie Sheen drops out of college, whatever. That was kind of Oliver Stone's experience to a certain extent. Dale Dye tells a story about somehow through some reporter, he got Oliver Stone's home phone number. There were no cell phones back then. And he figured out that if he calls, he's usually home on Sunday mornings. And so he calls Oliver Stone, doesn't know him from Adam. And Oliver Stone answers the phone. He's like, "Hey, Mr. Stone." He's like, "Yeah, who's this?" He goes, "Well, you don't know me, but you need me." He's like, "Oh, really?" He goes, "Yeah, I'm a military advisor. I understand you're getting ready to put together a movie." Well, the movie he was getting ready to put together was Platoon. He goes, "You need me as your advisor. I'm a retired Marine." He just sold himself on this phone call impromptu to the guy's house. Well, Oliver Stone hired him, and it won an Academy Award. And Dale Dye's name, when Oliver Stone went up there to accept, he said, "Thanks to Dale Dye for blah, blah, blah." And all of a sudden Dale Dye was on the map, and now he's had more, more business, and he knows what to do with it ever since. And so he took those guys, Charlie Sheen, he took those like 6 of them to somewhere in the Philippines. And for like 6 weeks up in the jungle, Dale Dye was their platoon commander. And he gave them all, it was like their own little version of boot camp or OCS. He ran those guys for 6 weeks through the jungle, and they talked and integrated and act like an actual platoon and squad, and had them geared up before they started filming. So they had all the lingo. They were like crusty soldiers by the time they started filming, all because of Dale Dye's training program. So that was pretty cool. I found that, like, on first glance, it's like, oh, I need to get somebody famous on my podcast, right? Which is cool, but one, it's hard to do, and two, I'm not sure how much your average guy or gal getting out of the military or your average military spouse can relate to like the really successful rich guy.
Yeah.
And so I found that normal people like you and I that have gotten out of the military and done this or that have just as good of stories that are very relatable to the people that are listening, the people getting out of the military or the military spouse that's, stuck in Germany or Japan and can't get a job on base because there aren't any. And so it's kind of worked out that way. So I've never focused on trying to get famous people to boost my ratings or anything but once in a while, like a Dale Dye, I'm trying to think. So really, to answer your question, I don't know if I really have a favorite. Like you said, you never know what you're going to get when somebody comes. You kind of read it like, oh, this is going to be a lame interview. And all of a sudden they turn out to be great. And then other times it's like you're pulling teeth to try to get somebody to talk. You just never know what you're going to get. So honestly, I don't know if I really have a favorite. I would just say that it's amazing. The one unexpected benefit of being a podcast host is the network that comes out of it. When you're on a podcast for 30, 40 minutes with somebody, you get to know them really well. For the most part, that person is going to take your email or take your call thereafter. Yeah. And so I've got this phenomenal network of people. And if I don't know somebody, I probably know somebody that does if I'm trying to get a hold of somebody or do something. And so I've just been really surprised at the phenomenal military type entrepreneurial network that it's built.
Very cool. So there's a couple of, and again, it's called veteranonthemove.com is Snooze's website. And there's a couple of resource books here, the top 7 paths to freedom. Mm-hmm. One of them, and then I think there's another one as well that veterans that are getting ready to transition out or their spouses can sign up to receive. Are those things that you put together, or is that another kind of veterans assistance?
Yeah. The new one is, I think it's 36. I had a list up to 40. Every time I interviewed somebody that had been through a veteran entrepreneurship boot camp or been through the Syracuse University training program or went to the service disabled veteran-owned business certification course. Anytime anybody went to any course like that, I would just write it down on a list. And I created this list of like 40 over a couple of years. And I had a Filipino virtual assistant. I gave her the list. I said, go to all these people's websites, take little clips and what people need to know about applying for the program, put the whole thing into a PDF. And that's the top 36 entrepreneurship programs for veterans and their spouses. And so that's a list of 36 programs that are out there that will help. Most of them are open to all of them are open to veterans. A lot of them are specific military spouse. Some of them are open to both.
Okay.
And most of them are free. And to get the download, to get my list, that's free too.
Okay.
And so you just go to the veteronthemove.com website and you can enter your email address and it'll email you the PDF. And the other one you mentioned, Top 7 Paths to Freedom, that was my original back when I first started the podcast. And that was basically a subset of the list of 36. It's like 7 quick and easy things to do to just start getting started and get your head in the right mindset to get going in entrepreneurship.
What I'm finding as far as military guys getting ready to transition to the civilian world, I just remember I didn't really have much in terms of a plan. You just kind of, the first job I interviewed for was a guy that my wife and I were renting his condo in UTC. I took a job with him, and then that sort of set the path. But I've got a property that a young Marine captain and his girlfriend, and he's getting ready to get out in about a year, and he's getting ready to take the LSATs and the all this crazy. So he's been, and I don't know if it's the younger guys are more savvy to all that, but I mean, he's got a plan a year out, whereas I was just like, getting ready to leave in 2 months.
Yeah. I'm sure there's still both kinds.
Yeah, I would assume so. That to me was, hearing him, I was definitely impressed. Do you get guys and girls, do you get veterans that kind of feedback that you get, like, Snooze, that book was awesome, that helped out a ton? I mean, you must be getting some great feedback from these people.
Yeah, one of the things we talk about on the Veteran on the Move podcast, it's not just entrepreneurship. Transition is always a part of every military member's life and the spouse. So we talk about transition a lot. And the big things as far as transition are concerned are, like the motivated captain you mentioned, have a plan way out. Like, you can never start too early putting things together and planning.
Yeah.
And so some guys are going to go to school. You got the GI Bill, man. That's like awesome. And, a young Marine I interviewed a long time ago, like one of my first 10 interviews, he had a really good point. He's like, dude, don't waste your GI Bill to go to JUCO. There's a lot of these really big universities that are great schools. And if you're a veteran, they want you because they know the GI Bill pays. But they know you're going to do good in school because you got at least 4 years of discipline and experience in the world. And they know you're going to be a good student. And they want those kinds of people on their campus. Yeah. So don't set the bar too low as far as what school you may want to go to. Try, how many people we know that have gotten into Harvard Business School? I mean, Harvard loves grabbing military guys and gals, to get. So don't waste your GI Bill on the local community college unless that's really, really what you want to do. Because once you expend your GI Bill, whether you spend it on a cheap school or an expensive school, either way, it's gone. So you might as well get the good stuff, right? Anyways, I thought that was really good advice. So, so some folks want to go to school. Some people just want to get a job. And then there's the entrepreneurial side too. And sometimes guys do 2 or 3 of those, and start early. And remember this, most people don't get hired off of a resume or off of an electronic application online. That's not how you get hired. You get hired like you did. My wife knew someone where she was working, and I got hired with that guy and started there first. That's how you're going to get hired if you're going for a job. And that's the best way. The really good jobs never make it to the job boards. And they're getting, like, I've known guys who, it's almost like they did it to see if they could do it. I applied for literally 1,000 jobs online. I never got a call for one of them. Like, yeah, but how much calling did you do? Yeah. Well, no, I applied for that. Well, and here's a misconception out there from on the veteran side of things, that all these companies really, really want to hire veterans. They do, But remember, nobody owes you a damn thing. If you keep that in the back of your mind, it helps you have the right mindset. They want to hire veterans. They value your experience, but don't walk in like somebody owes you something, and don't expect someone to call you. You're still going to have to be very aggressive and play all the right parts and meet all the right people to get your foot in the door. And when you're in the interview, you're still going to have to perform. They're not just going to give it to you because you're a veteran. There's a lot of guys that have a really bad impression about that stuff. I hear about that all the time.
Yeah, interesting. And what I've found, I've done a couple of really cool interviews with some organizations that are help out vets. And one of them, I'm not sure if you know this about this organization or not, and I'm sure there's something like this in Kansas City, but it's a group called Shelter to Soldier. And what they do, Graham Bloom, I'm actually interviewing him on Thursday. Graham is a professional dog trainer for the last 20 years. And after the initial invasion, I think 2 Marines came back in 03 and 04 that had brought back stray dogs. And that in and of itself, how do you do that still blows my mind, because there were stray dogs running all over the place out there. Anyway, these guys bring these dogs back, and they're introduced somehow to Graham, who was at the time a professional dog trainer. And then all of a sudden he's hooked up with these guys. So he started Shelter to Soldier 7 or 8 years ago. And what they do is they go and adopt dogs out of shelters, train them for a year, and then pair them up with PTSD, other battlefield type injuries as emotional support dogs. And when I first heard about this group, I was like, I love this guy. I don't even know who he is, and I got to get him on here. I got to talk to him.
Yeah.
And so I've had him on for a real short interview, and I played in his charity golf tournament. Got a chance to see him there, and so I'm setting up for a long form interview with him. But what I'm finding is there is so much out there that are to help veterans, to assist veterans, that, man, you just gotta, even if you just tap the word veteran in a computer, you're gonna find, the resources are just incredible.
Yeah. Yeah. And most people don't know about them. And
Right.
there's not really any place to go to find all of them. So like, here's an example. I've had a couple of veteran professional dog trainers who do similar programs like you're talking about,
Yep.
but I've never heard of the guy you're talking about. Yeah. But I've had 2 or 3 professional veteran dog trainers on my show.
Okay. Very cool.
So there's so much stuff out there. You think you know everybody, and you think you've seen it all or heard it all, and then you haven't. You're not even scratching the surface. So there's so much good going on. So many veterans are running phenomenal nonprofits and doing such good stuff out there. And most people, unless you're close to it or happen to know someone, most people don't know about it. And so you've got to make the effort to get away from the computer, get out in town, of course, with the COVID stuff, but when we're able to go talk to each other again, get out in town and meet people. And networking is the best way to business success, and networking is the best way to a good job when you get out of the military. You have to network. And like, network is like, I like to say network is like faith. You have to believe in it without having proof that it works. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So networking is that way. You have to go to that meeting and meet a bunch of people that you don't have any idea who you're about to meet. And then eventually, over time, you start raising enough relationships, something turns out and something drops in your lap. Literally, that's how networking works if you're doing it right. Yeah. Networking is not, oh, there's a guy that works for this company that I want to work for, so I'm going to go to this meeting and meet that one guy so he can get me hired. That's like a deliberate connection that you're trying for. That almost never works out, because the guy smells it on you from the beginning. He's like, this guy's on a mission, man. He's got an agenda here. Yeah. Networking is no agenda, meeting people with no agenda. And you just have to do it enough and meet people and foster those relationships and follow up and send thank you notes. And all of a sudden someone's going to be like, "Hey, do you know any veterans?" "Oh yeah, I know. Yeah, I know Rain Man. He was at this meeting the other night. He's a real good guy. Let's hire him." That's how it happens.
Yeah. Yeah.
Over.
Because of the popularity of Veteran on the Move, do you get asked to talk to big groups at all, or you out there kind of doing that sort of thing as well?
Yeah, sometimes. One other thing I'm involved in. My wife says I'm involved in way too many things, but because like getting out of the Marine Corps was like almost like being a kid in a candy store. Because all that time I couldn't really go do other things, and then when I got out of the Marine Corps, I'm like I just grabbed onto everything I could. But I'm a city leader, which I think they're changing the name to ambassador for Bunker Labs. Bunker Labs is a veteran-run organization that helps foster entrepreneurship in the veteran community. So I'm a city leader ambassador for the Kansas City area for Bunker Labs, which means we have a meeting once a month with a local entrepreneur, business leader, maybe sometimes a veteran, but our job is to set up a network of here in the community for veterans to plug into that want to get involved in entrepreneurship when they get out. So theoretically, we've already got this network of business leaders and entrepreneurs and access to capital and people that want to help veterans and military spouses start businesses. We've already got that all set up. And when somebody gets out and comes to Kansas City or comes back to Kansas City, they can come to us and we can just introduce them to the crowd and have access to people already for a network we built. So I really like Bunker Labs. That's what they do. Bunker Labs doesn't start businesses. We do have kind of like an incubator. We call it a veteran in residence, where every 6 months we run 10 local veterans or military spouses through a program. Mostly we give them access to like the local WeWork facility if WeWork stays in business. And we give them office access and bring them mentors and bring them connections and help them work through the business process of getting started. So Bunker Labs is another thing that I'm involved in. It's just strictly volunteer, but it's a great group of folks and very well organization.
I wonder if they must be doing that in other cities. I should probably look and see if they do something like that in San Diego. They must.
I know they've got a chapter in San Diego.
Yeah, okay. So Bunker Labs is a national thing then.
Oh yeah, definitely. I want to say we've got like, we've probably stood up a few in the last few months, but we've got like 30 or 32 chapters in about 28 states right now. And the goal by the end of 2022 is to have a chapter in every state.
Yeah.
So we got the globe covered. So, have a chapter, and usually they're in the population centers, around the cities, where the people are. So I know there's one in San Diego, like California could have probably 3 or 4 of them. I know there's one up in, they call it the Bay Area. They got the Bay Area location around San Francisco. I'm almost positive there's one in San Diego, and there might even be one in LA too.
I'll have to check.
You have to check them out. It's bunkerlabs.org.
Okay.
You got a map there.
Love it. Yeah, that's the one thing. It's funny. I was doing my goal setting. I do it at the end of each year for the following year, and I did this a couple of years ago. And one of my long-term goals was hilarious. Was I just want to do something to help the vets, and I want to do something to help dogs. Because I love animals. I'm a huge dog guy, and I'm a huge vet guy. Yeah. And in my little notes on my book, I wrote, how can I put those two together? And then this year when I found the Shelter to Soldier, I was like, damn it, the guy already did it. He's already way ahead of me. So I think it's awesome. And it was kind of one of those things that it almost, that just like, your dog trainers, that's one of those programs I think should be nationwide. And I'm sure it is in a kind of unconnected, unofficial way. I'm sure they're all over the place, but it's such a great outfit.
Yeah. I had a similar experience when I was trying to figure out what the subject of my podcast was going to be, the subject matter. And I was like, I really like entrepreneurship, but I really want it to be veteran oriented. And I didn't make the connection. I couldn't make the connection myself. I couldn't. And Nico Marcolongo was his name. He was a Marine out in California. I was chatting with him on the phone. He's like, well, maybe you need to teach veterans entrepreneurship. And I'm like, I literally couldn't make the connection myself, So, and then, here we are. So
that's awesome.
it's hilarious. with your goal setting, they say if you show someone else your goals and people aren't laughing at you, then you're not setting your goals high enough. So
I like it.
they're making someone laugh.
I like it. It's funny. Conor McGregor, the MMA guy, says almost the exact same thing. He's like, I tell people what my goals are. And he said they used to laugh and they're not laughing anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah. You tell them to make it out there, get it out there to the world.
Yeah.
Very cool.
In the end, it's not about accomplishing the goal, but you got to put a pin out there on the map or mark it somehow. And because they say, Earl Nightingale from one of the old personal motivation tapes, he says, happiness and success is the daily pursuit of a worthy goal. So you got to have the goal in order to pursue it. But really the happiness and success comes through the pursuit of the goal, not achieving the actual goal. It's a very, as far as goal setting goes, I'm in a mastermind and we all doing all our come as you will be 3 years from now kind of stuff, goal setting. And it's all about the pursuit of the goal, not necessarily accomplishing the goal. So, you got to enjoy the ride. Yeah.
And the path becomes the reward, and you never know how that's going to go.
When you set the goal, then you figure out you'll figure out how to get there once you put your destination on the map.
Yeah.
And, you can't worry exactly what the details are, the route to get there. But if you set the goal, you'll figure out the route along the way.
Yeah. Yeah. I love it. Hey, so let me kind of ask you a little bit of, we talked about it briefly before we started the podcast, but what are you seeing? I mean, what's your normal route for the airlines? Do you have a normal route, or are you kind of all over the place?
Well, now I'm flying international. So before the whole COVID thing hit, I was going to Japan, Korea, and China mostly. Wow. And then we did in Amsterdam once in a while. But actually, I just saw in our December bid package, we're finally going back to Shanghai.
Really?
Yeah. Just not that much, but it's on there.
Yeah. Where do you fly out of? Do you fly out of Kansas City, or do you have to
I'm based out of Detroit, so I got to get to Detroit.
Okay. Detroit Metro. Gotcha.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And I've been based out of Atlanta, and I was out of New York for a couple of years, so I had lots of different bases, but right now it's Detroit.
Do you run across Vandal at all?
I've chatted with him a few times, like when I was thinking about going to the international category and everything. He's out on the West Coast, flying out of Seattle or LA the last time I talked to him, but I haven't. I probably talked to him 2 or 3 years ago on the phone when I was looking at making that move. Yeah.
Nice.
I never went into him on the airplane or anything.
It's funny because that's exactly what I was going to ask you, because I am waiting, because there's a lot of guys, especially from 775, that have made that jump, successfully made it into the airlines. And I keep waiting for that day when I hear the pilot's voice, and what am I going to do when I hear it? Because I love it. Have you ever run into anybody, a passenger that you knew that you flew with?
On a rare occasion, yeah. One time we had just taken off from Atlanta, I think it was, and one of my Marine buddies, he goes, "Hey, Snooze!" Like he heard me talking on the radio on the Atlanta Tower, and he said my name, and I'm like, "Who's that?" And it was one of my a Marine Corps buddy from Atlanta, but he wasn't a Marine Corps pilot. He's a Marine officer, but he had gone the civilian route in aviation, but he's there at Delta Airlines also. Trying to think, I've run into, especially like even here in Kansas City, like Ed Peake's his name. He's an American now, but me and him and Tim Rayner all carpooled all the way to Quantico when we first got commissioned. We're getting in 1990, and I hadn't seen him really since the basic school. And I was getting on the crew bus there in Kansas City, and boom, there's Ed Peake. I'm like, holy cow, it'd probably been 28, 29 years since we ran into each other. I always knew what he was doing through other people, but I ran into him. And, Joe Ducote?
Name doesn't sound familiar.
Yeah.
who do we know? You know, Jekyll, Moose, Vandal.
Yeah.
Hog doesn't fly for the airlines anymore, does he? Or he's just doing Cal Fire, I think, right?
I ran into Hog one time. He had gone back. He was doing the firefighting thing for several years, long time. He finally went back to United.
Really? Okay, good.
I was literally, I forget what city it was. I was getting on the elevator and Hog comes walking off the elevator and I'm like, no way. And so we were able to chat for a while. He was getting ready to head out and I was like trying to go to bed because I had to get up at 4 a.m. or whatever. So I ran into Hog in the hotel.
I love it.
He's back at United now.
Good. I'm glad to hear that. I got this picture. This had to have been early, maybe 10, 11 time frame. But Hog was in town. Vandal was living out here at the time in San Diego. And then Trigger flies a corporate jet.
Yeah.
He was in town and I had him all over for dinner and we had big steaks and just had a great time catching up. And that was actually very cool. Do you keep in touch with many of the guys from our deployments? Have
you seen Spock?
I lost touch.
Flying a Cobra for the Spock's flying a Cobra for some firefighting Cobra out in California. He's posting pictures of being up in the mountains watching fires all the time.
Yeah, I do. You know what's amazing is he's essentially a FAC-A, and some of these real big fires over the last few years, they've got like old L-1011s, just some massive aircraft that are buzzing these ridge lines. I didn't realize that they were that big. And
I've had a couple of what you could call them close calls, wildfires in Colorado this year. We were out in August at my niece's wedding, and we went down I-70 from our condo to go to some hot springs. Yep. And it was during the day, and we were in the water, and we see this fire erupt, like going back the direction we just come from. We're in the springs, and this massive fire erupts, and it looked like an atomic bomb had gone off, and all of a sudden, fire trucks and everything. And then we sat there and watched the aerial assault, and I saw MD-80s, L-1011s, DC-10s, KC-130 types. I think it was some European turboprop thing. And there was like a King Air up there orchestrating the whole thing. We watched the whole show from sitting in the hot springs and had to go way around to get home that night.
Wow.
Yeah.
I remember we were in Yosemite a couple of years ago after one of the big fires there. Well, during the big fires. And we were driving out of the park to our hotel, and the road we were on happened to be crisscrossed with all that orange fire that those guys were dropping. It's crazy. Yeah. And so I had no idea
they were using large airliners like that, jets.
I can't imagine how much shit those things hold. You know?
Yeah, I can really imagine.
And the rest of it's just a big tank full of stuff. It's incredible.
Yeah, just the massive amount of whatever that orange stuff. Yeah. Agent Orange.
Yeah, exactly. It's funny because I try hard to keep in touch with everybody, and I was doing a real good job of it early on, and now it's kind of just life gets in the way. And
yeah, it's not easy. Everybody's got their own life going on. When you're in a unit together and you're doing the same thing all the time, it's easy to be focused in together like that. But when everyone just scatters to the wind, it's tough to try to bring in all those loose ends. That when you get to be our age, it's called going to reunions, I suppose.
Exactly. I mean, I try to do the text every once in a while. Chicklets, it follows me on my Instagram, the RAINMAN'S Take Instagram. So that's kind of cool.
Awesome.
You remember Woody?
Yeah.
So this actually, he would be a pretty cool interview as well. He's a master distiller and owns his own distillery down here in San Diego.
Oh yeah, that'd be awesome.
Story House Spirits is the name of the group. So
really,
yeah, Matt, it's great. It's I had him on, did a little tasting. It was fun.
Yeah, like the big ones for veterans are coffee, brewery, distillery, something to do with tactical gear or weapons, and T-shirts.
Exactly. Right after that, there's Nine Line, there's Black Rifle Coffee, there's that's classic.
Yeah.
I love it. Yeah, it's so it's it's funny because my office, I've got old pictures from from 04 and 05. It's just, it blows my mind that it's that long ago.
I know. Time flies. And that's really, I used to hear people that got out of the military and everything like, I miss the people, man. I miss the boys, And I get it. And that's really true. I mean, that's the thing you miss the most is hanging around the people and that those in the intensity of everything. And, that feeling of I'm doing something worthy here and doing, mission accomplishment and that sense of purpose. That's one of the biggest, from my non-psychological point of view, guys losing their sense of purpose is the number one contributor to depression and suicide and everything else. Yeah. So you've got to find something to engage upon, whether it's military related or something totally different. If you don't find a new sense of purpose, and you're the one that's going to have to do it, no one can do it for you. You got to find a new sense of purpose, however silly or stupid it may be, or however serious it may be. If you've got a good sense of purpose, that's the most important thing to that successful transition.
Yeah. And just your general health overall. I mean, that was when I talked to Shoeshine earlier in the year about his 2 books, man, that was pretty eye-opening.
Yeah. I just ordered his book over the weekend.
Yeah.
I haven't read it yet. And when it hit the Commandant's reading list, I went in and I how you can usually, if you're looking at a book on Amazon, you can read like the first 3 or 4 pages of it or something like that.
Yep.
I read the first few pages of it and I was like, okay, I got to read this.
Yeah.
I got to read this book. Yeah. You know what other book I ordered, which I've never read? Baba Black Sheep, Pappy Boyington. I don't know why I connected those people. Like, I've never read Pappy Boyington's book. And I'm like, I read like the first 3 pages. Here's what's funny. He starts off, it's the summer of 1941, and he's at Pensacola at flight instructing, and he's getting ready to leave the Marine Corps because he owes the Marine Corps a bunch of money for his uniforms that he had to buy from him. You remember that?
Oh, yeah.
1941, I'm like, but all the things he talked about and all the jargon and the banter back, it was all the same. It could have been the year 2000 or 2010. And it's 1841.
It's good to hear that we were all cut from basically the same cloth.
Yeah, it's all the same stuff. Of course, I only got a few pages into it, and then I just ordered the book. So I was waiting for those 2 to come.
Yeah, continue.
Read more, man. Do you read very much?
I try to. Yeah, it's
bad, man. I've like almost, I don't read anything except what's on the computer or my phone. I'm like, okay, that's part of my way of trying to turn over a new leaf. I'm like, I need to just go back to normal reading.
Dude, I'm gonna say something here to my fans. I'm gonna open the kimono a little bit here. Just put a couple of books on the crapper. Seriously, put it on the back there.
Yeah, and you spend enough time there anyways, right?
2 pages a day. Next thing you know, you got the book done. But yeah, I do try to read as much as I can, just because
it's great.
This world is crazy right now, and
well, it's good for your brain, man. Reading and writing or journaling, you hear it over and over and over from all the experts. Read every day and journal every day.
Yep. And I'll tell you, getting back to Shoeshine's book, Continuing Actions, the second one, which is kind of devoted solely to addressing PTSD. After I read that book, I broke out all, and it's in my office. My office is literally right behind this wall. And I've got all my Iraq maps out. I've got all my Iraq journals out. And it was actually a very good exercise to do that. Because you don't want to forget, but you also want to make sure it's not an anchor around your neck either.
Yeah. And, we didn't mention Rhino. His son's a Marine now, right?
I didn't hear that, but I remember, was it 1 or 2 years ago when Trump was giving the address for Memorial Day at Arlington?
Mm-hmm.
He mentioned Rhino's daughter, who she has a job somewhere in his administration. And
Oh,
she's, you know, what, 23, 24 years old right now.
yeah.
Beautiful young girl.
Yeah.
And I look back, I was like, she was probably 6 or 7 when that went down. So
She was 8 and he was 6.
okay.
2004.
Yep.
Yep. July 28th.
July 28th. And for anybody who's listening here, that was our only killed in action while we were over there, and Snooze happened to be in the aircraft when that happened. You know, Snooze is funny. I was thinking about it. I wanted to bring it up, but I wasn't sure if I should. So
Yeah.
I'm glad that you did.
No, I don't mind talking about it. Sometimes it hits me out of nowhere. You know, my voice freezes up, but you never know when it's going to reach up and just grab me. But I don't normally talk about it. You know how the old, and I've been over this many, many times because I've given a brief on my experiences in Iraq of several people over the years, groups or whatever. If you have a captive audience, then I'm comfortable talking about it. But so many of us, if you're at the cocktail party and somebody's like, "Hey man, what was Iraq like?" And you start, "Well, I'll tell you what, this one day," and then everyone like looking the other way and like you really don't have time to listen, dude. So don't even bother asking. Yeah. But if you have a captive audience, that's when it's different. And because some of those stories, some of those things we experienced, they deserve people's attention. It's not some flippant comment at a cocktail party or whatever over dinner and make everybody feel uncomfortable. Yeah. So I don't have a problem talking about it when we have a captive audience, which is really what you have when you're doing a podcast. So yeah, I was flying with Dave Green, Rhino, July 28th, 2004. And we were hit by 5 rounds, 7.62 over Ramadi. And one of the rounds killed him instantly. And one round took out our left engine and the other rounds hit up the left side of the aircraft. And I was fortunate enough to be able to fly back on one engine and land back at our airfield at TQ. But for him, it was instant. He never said anything. So one of those, proverbial, probably never even knew what happened. So,
well, I'll tell you what, dude, again, going back to my journals when I was after reading Shushine's book, we were in the exact same spot over Ramadi a week before, July 21st. Hooking and jabbing, almost in the identical spot where you guys. And I'll never forget when you got back, after flying that, basically limping home after that. That one's going to stick with me for a while. And every July 28th, I kind of say a small little prayer to Rhino.
Yeah, me too. That time in 2004, this happens all the time. Like there was so much going on a regular basis that somebody like you would be out and be involved in a couple of different engagements, a whole bunch of stuff happening. And somebody like me would never even hear about it. And then like a few weeks later, you'd be talking to somebody about, I'm like, "Hey, when did that happen? I never heard about that." And you guys are in a serious firefight. And there was so much of that happening that there were all these stories that, probably never got captured by everybody. I don't know how many times I heard that guys are talking in the ready room about something going on. And, then he laid down on the gown and I'm like, "Wait, what are you guys talking about?" "Oh, a couple of weeks ago." I'm like, "A couple of weeks ago? I never even heard that." Yeah. Like the Rhino thing, everybody knew about that one, but there were so many other engagements and small skirmishes that happened on a regular basis that just, probably a lot of people didn't hear about them unless you're in on the crew or right there with you guys when you first got back. So it's crazy to think how much stuff happened.
I know and it sounds almost unbelievable when you think about that. And each one of those is a hammer to your memory and your mind, and adding on top of each other. Where you don't even remember what you did 2 weeks ago.
I know. And then, like, you ever been like had your wife or some family members in the room when you're like with 3 or 4 guys trading stories back and forth, and the intensity of the stories and how we present the stories, and you look over at your wife and she's like, "Oh my God, you guys all that stuff happened?" There's so, and sometimes the best stories aren't even about combat or flight ops or anything else. Sometimes it's the stupid stuff that happened in the tent or the radio room or who knows, man. I mean, just yeah.
And that's the one thing I never really wanted. I mean, I still don't, and that's why this is so great catching up with you. And whenever I get a chance to talk to some of those guys, it's just nice to reminisce and remember a lot of good things and a lot of not so good things.
Yeah, no kidding. So, yeah, it's been good chat with you, and wish we could always, veteran wide. I mean, we all wish we could make contact with the old buddies on a regular basis, but it's hard to do, man. People got lives and everything going on, and it's that's really where they came up with reunions.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what, man, I'm really glad that we got a chance to reconnect.
Yeah, me too. It's been awesome chatting with you and brings
a lot of fun, brother.
Yeah.
Very, very impressive with the veteran on the move. So if anybody's out there that's in the military looking to get out, definitely check it out. It's an awesome resource. veteranonthemove.com. Joe Snooze Crane. Thanks, brother.
Yeah, and if anybody wants to reach out to me, if you got podcasting questions or if I can do anything for you, my email is Joe, Joe, at veteranonthemove.com. So be glad to chat with anybody that
I may take
help anybody out with anything. Yeah, you do.
I'm just a rookie. I'm just a boot. It's good to see a trailblazer out there.
Hey, I heard somebody told me in the very beginning of podcasting, you have to get all the bad episodes out of you before you get to the good ones. And I'm like, well, once I heard that, I'm like, oh, okay, there's really no way to get around it. You just got to go through it.
Yep, exactly. Just get it out there and get the experience going.
Well, how many interviews for you is this? Because I mean, you seem like
you are episode 26, and of those 26 episodes, I've done 3 that are just kind of me for 20 minutes, kind of giving my take on what's going on in the world.
Yeah, 26, man. You got all the bad stuff out of the way now.
It's funny. The very first one I did was with my cousin who's up in Los Angeles, and he runs TEDx, the TEDx Talk program up there. And I literally, it was my first one, so I had no idea what I was doing. He's used to giving interviews, and so he just kind of carried the day. And that still, to this day, is one of the more popular ones that I did.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
It takes some getting used to. I mean, like I said, I interview a lot of people where it's their first interview they've ever done, and sometimes it's quite painful. Like I'm literally pulling teeth. I'm like, dude, come on, man, you got it out.
I'm running out of questions.
Yeah, it takes a lot. It just takes a while to get used to that. But I think that's like most veterans. They've got up and spoke in front of their fire team or their squad or their platoon or squadron or whatever enough times where they're comfortable public speaking, so to speak. But it's similar to that. But yeah, I tell you, I was the few times I've been interviewed, especially in the beginning, it's a lot more intense when you're being interviewed than when you're doing the interview. At least for me it is. I don't know.
Snooze, you did great. Consolation, you did great.
Too, man. You're like a pro at it now.
No, this is all good. I just wish we were at a bar having a drink together.
Oh, I know.
Someday we'll get that going.
Yeah,
all right, my brother. Well, listen, great talking to you. Joe Snooze Crane, veteranonthemove.com. And I'll finish it off like this. If you're in the military, the police department, fire department, or first responders, that's you out there. Thank you very much for your service. Stay safe. Snooze, great catching up to you.
You bet.
All right,
take care.
Guys, this is the Rain Man. Thanks for watching. Thanks for watching Rain Man's Take, observations on the world we live in. If you like the content, don't forget to hit the subscribe button below. You can also follow Rain Man's Take on Instagram at Rain Man's Take. Also, check out our website at www.rainmanstakepodcast.com and send your comments to rainmanstake@gmail.com. Keep an eye out for future podcasts, which will be coming out every Thursday at 5 p.m. West Coast time.